Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, Highlands. First, let me say it has been truly a pleasure just being able to worship God with you throughout this month as we've been looking at the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I know we've come to a point where we're walking into this weekend and the resurrection of Jesus Christ has truly been on your mind. And today, the world sees this weekend and this day as Good Friday. And I wanted to just take a moment, a very brief moment, and maybe share some thoughts with you, maybe to help focus on the meaning or what Good Friday is all about. When you're thinking about the Holy Week, I've got to be honest, I've got a slight problem with why we call it Good Friday or how we call it Good Friday. And I say a problem, or maybe I should just say a misunderstanding of the fact that we actually call it or designate it this day as a good day, because that's really my issue. Now, I understand all of the other terms that we use for Holy Week. I understand Holy Monday and Holy Tuesday as it represents the time when Jesus curses the fig tree and cleanses the temple from the abuse of being used for profit. I understand why we call it Spy Wednesday, actually, as it represents the day that Judas agrees to spy on Jesus for some members of the Sanhedrin Council. I even understand Monday, Thursday. That word Monday, it comes from a Latin word called mandatum. And this is actually where we get our English word mandate from. Because this is actually the day that Jesus mandated the Lord's Supper and also washed the feet of the disciples. I even understand Silent Saturday, as it represents the day that they kept the Sabbath and they said nothing. I definitely understand Easter Sunday. When you think about Easter Sunday, it all has to do with, in the early history of Christianity, they debated a lot about the correct date of the resurrection of Jesus. And like with most debates when it surrounds Christianity, it's always tied into seasonal changes. Because definitely we know that seasonal changes are directly connected and were created by God. And so that's why the debate always kind of centers around the changes of seasons. And so, in simple terms, they decided that the resurrection of Jesus Christ should be celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. Listen, don't ask, just Google it. I understand. But this typically landed in April. And we could go into the whole spiel of Estra, but honestly, it's not relevant at this moment. And you can Google that as well if you want to. But the importance is that spring had come, which represented new life, and that new life had come. So I understand all the names of the Holy Week. I understand Easter. I understand Silent Saturday, Monday, Thursday, Spy Wednesday, Holy Monday, and Tuesday. But there's something about Good Friday that I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me at times. It leaves me a little uneasy with it, or at least I have a little trouble understanding it, but only because we call it good. You see, for me, as I pay attention to the Word of God and I try to place myself in that moment, that day was far from good. It was a day of betrayal. It was a day of denial. It was a day of abandonment. It was a day of multiple mishandlings of justice. It was a day of torture, a day of execution, a day of death. To be honest, that was not a good day as we understand good. Now, don't get me wrong. I know why we have eventually called it a good day. Because we, in today's society, we have the gift and the benefit of what we call temporal displacement. And that simply means we are so far removed from it in time that we can look back on it and see how God was working in the midst of it in ways that those that were in the middle of it couldn't. They couldn't see it at that time. And that's the gift of time. You can be going through something and it's not until months or years later until you can look back on it and see how God was working in your life. Like, let's be honest. I guarantee you, even in this moment as you're watching this video, you could think of an example where in that moment you thought it was the most horrific time of your life. You didn't understand anything about it. But now 20 years later, you look back and you can see, man, that was God. So that's the benefit of what we call temporal displacement. And so it allows us to be able to look at this day and call it good because we can look back and see how God was working everything out for our soul salvation and preparing the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But I wonder if in those days, would they have called it good? Think about it. Jesus is dying on the cross. Listen, he had thousands of followers, but in this moment of the cross, he literally only could find 5 people in support of him at the foot of the cross. This is Jesus who had performed a multitude of miracles. He had helped a magnitude of people. He is dying and only 5 people are standing near the cross. Where is everyone else? Where are the people he fed in the wilderness? Where's the woman that he healed with the issue of blood? Where's the blind man that he gave sight to? Where's those lepers that he cleansed of leprosy? Where are the apostles? Where's Peter? Peter, you promised to stay by his side. Peter was the most adamant and passionate one out of all of them. Peter became the leader of the apostles, and Peter was not there standing near the cross. Now, like you, I've tried to rationalize when I think about this, that maybe Peter and the others were just scared that the Jews would kill them like they were killing Jesus. But today, I really want us to approach the cross with a different mindset as we are preparing to celebrate his resurrection on Sunday. Maybe they weren't there because standing near the cross is hard. Watching someone you love die will be the most difficult thing you will ever have to do. Standing near the cross is not a fun endeavor. Instead, it's one that everyone will have to do. At some point, life will stand you near the cross and you will experience the pain of watching someone you love die. And even with all the religious cliches that we throw, the assurances that we give to one another that they are in a better place, that one day you will be able to look back on it and see how God was working, it will still be hard to think that was a good day. You see, standing near a cross is never a good day. You know, it reminded me of the moment as a child. I was about 14 or 15 years old. I remember I had a best friend named Paul, and he stayed a couple of houses down the street from me. And we did everything together. We really did. His mother was my mother. My mother was his mother. His mother loved me so much. I was a part of the family so much that even on mornings when I would miss the bus and he actually caught the bus, I would walk down to her house and beg her. Well, really, I didn't even have to beg her. I just asked her. And after a while, all I had to do was knock and she already knew what had happened. And she would get up out of her bed. She worked the night shift, so she had just gotten home. She would get up out of her bed and get in the car and she would try to chase the bus down. And if she did not catch the bus in time at a certain point, she would take me all the way to school. Now, her children were on the bus. And she never once, what young people would say these days, snitched on me. She would never go and tell my mom. And then there was this one day, my brother and I, we were coming home from school after high school. We had let out after practice. And we were riding down a 2-lane road that leads to our house. And as we're riding, we see all of these police lights going off and the ambulances are there and people are beside the road. And we pull up and we see a car that resembled his mother's. And I look over to my brother and say, hey man, I think that's Paul's mom. I think that's their car. And so we pull over and my brother and we get out and we go running. And as we get closer to the car, I see Paul and I see his mom, but then I see his youngest sister. What had happened, they had been in a terrible accident and his sister was in the back seat and it looked as though they had been T-boned and his sister was back there and she was bleeding from the mouth. And the ambulance was trying to take care of the other car. They didn't see or understand how serious it was in his mother's car. And they were screaming and saying, my daughter. And my brother, I remember him trying to do CPR and doing everything that he could to try to help her breathe and just continue to breathe. And in that moment, I saw Paul as he sat and just watched his sister dying, helpless with nothing he could do. And I wish this story had a good ending, but it doesn't. And as she got into the ambulance, by the time she made it to the hospital, she was declared dead. And it reminded me in this moment, in this day, remind me that we all will be at that moment where we have to stand near a cross, just like Mary was as she sat and she watched her son dying. And it made me begin to think about, well, how is that a good day? How was that a good day for her? But then there I began to understand something, that there is good news. I asked myself, how does Mary do it? How does she stand near a cross and watch her son die? How does she stand near a cross and watch him be ridiculed and mocked? Then I realized something. I realized something that's invaluable in our Christian walk in life. That when you get to a point where you're asking the question of how, and you can't figure it out and you don't know how, that maybe, John, maybe you're asking the wrong question. That maybe the question isn't how, but who. That in the moments of life when you don't know how we are going to make it, how we're going to get through, how we're going to get to the next step in life, that we are asking really the wrong question. We're not supposed to be asking how, but who gets Mary through this? Who gets her through this moment of watching her son die? It's God. Who is it that gives Mary the strength to stand near the cross? It's God. You see, Good Friday represents for us and should remind us that He has never and will ever leave us or forsake us, even when we find ourselves in our Friday of life. Highlands, I pray we always remember the who in our lives when we find ourselves in the how of Friday. God bless you, and I cannot wait to see you on Easter Sunday.